Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here this morning. The recent tax hike bill had a devastating impact on my district, the 5th District of New Jersey, gutting the state and local tax deduction, better known as SALT, sharply limiting New Jersey's property tax deductions, and imposing a massive tax hike on New Jersey's families and businesses. Last year, I worked with New Jersey officials on legislation to provide real tax relief for my constituents via tax credits for charitable contributions to our towns. After New Jersey passed law, the IRS, without any legislative basis, against legal precedent, and decades of previous IRS approvals, issued provisional rules that would severely limit New Jersey's ability to offer tax relief through the charitable deduction, undermining New Jersey's new law, allowing our towns to use it. And it also hurt, as you probably know, 33 other states like Alabama, Georgia, and South Carolina that have been using the charitable provision for decades now. It's not a red state or blue state issue, Mr. Secretary, but I really believe that Congress didn't give you or the IRS permission to interpret the new tax law as they see fit. These rules are still provisional, and I just was asking you if you have a status update for us on the limits on the charitable tax deduction for these purposes.
Well, first of all, let me just say I do appreciate the SALT deduction is having impact on some of the economies, and we are monitoring that carefully. We did allow for a deduction that did cover a very significant amount of the people. As it relates to the charitable deduction, this administration very much supports charitable deductions, as does the department. I think the issue that you're referring to is that there are no limits on charitable deductions where there are not a quid pro quo attached. The question I think you're referring to is where certain states tried to get around the federal law by passing certain laws, and I understand that's still under further review by the IRS and our legal department. But
what about the 33 states that have been using this for decades now? Should they have to stop immediately?
Well, again, we've spent a lot of time on this guidance. We are trying to make sure that the legitimate use of tax credits is still allowed. I believe the guidance is still under review, and we're happy to follow up with your office.
Do you have a sense of timing of when we're going to have when those rules will go final?
I think it's going to be out shortly. It is a priority of ours. Again, we want to make sure that legitimate use of charitable contributions is supported.
I know you were very involved personally, which is a little unusual in the approval process of these guidelines. Why did you feel a need to get personally involved in these particular ones? I know most of you don't, right?
No, actually, that's not the case. We meet almost daily with a team at Treasury, Office of Tax Policy, General Counsel, all of our areas, and we review actually every single regulation. I think it's my obligation, given the complexity of these issues, to make sure that I'm briefed on them. So this issue is no different than others.
Thank you. On SALT for a second, you advocated for SALT cuts by saying they, quote, predominantly benefited high-income earners to help pay for major tax cuts for American families, and estimated that, quote, approximately 5% of taxpayers will itemize and have state and local income tax deductions above the SALT cap. In my state, in New Jersey, 42.75, not 5%, of taxpayers in the 5th District, or approximately 359,000 people in the 4 counties I represent, actually claimed a SALT deduction. That's far from 5%. In fact, the average in Bergen County, one of my counties, is $24,783. After hearing the impact and reviewing this tax season, do you have a different view at all on these claims of what you originally said, sir?
Well, we're monitoring it carefully. I mean, I would comment that there are a lot of people with SALT deductions that do have AMT relief. I do think it does hit the high end of taxpayers significantly, but we are monitoring the impact on these economies and watching it carefully.
Thank you, sir. In the remaining time, if I can quickly ask you an Iran question. Last November, the full set of sanctions waived under the 2015 nuclear deal with Iran came back into effect. What impact do you see these newly imposed sanctions having, and where do you see issues with compliance?
I see these new sanctions being very impactful. They are having the impact that we want, which is absolutely limiting the amount of money that's going to Iran that's used for terrorist activities, that's used for military purposes. We were very pleased with the progress and the enforcement of these sanctions. So it's something we're monitoring very carefully.
Thank you very much for your time, sir. Thank you. I yield.